Everybody, it's about 6:31. Tonight is Tuesday, June 5th, 2018. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Marquette Township Board, and we're going to say the pledge if you'd like to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please, Randy.
Absent and excused this evening is Trustee LaRue, Trustee Wiegand.
Here.
Trustee Everson.
Here.
Trustee Marks.
Present.
Treasurer Johnson.
Here.
Clerk Rattari is here, and Supervisor Duran.
Here.
Staff present is Manager Gerard, our legal counsel Roger Zappa, and Fire Inspector Rob Cochran is here from the Fire Department, and Mike Springer from Planning, Recreation, and Roads is here, committee member.
Thanks, Randy. Public comment. Anybody wish to address us before we get started with business? You're welcome to come up to the podium. The microphone should be on. You've got to speak right into it, right up onto it. Name and address, please.
I'm Carl Hammerstrom, 33 Middle Island Point Road, and I'm here to support the library renewal and reserve the right, please, to speak at that time.
Sure.
Paul Marin, 274 Eagles Nest Road, ditto.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Anybody else?
I just wanted to, Mike Springer, Eagles Nest Road, on behalf of the Rec Committee. I just wanted to check when you wanted me to do a presentation on cleanup and National Trails Day. So is that under community linkage or?
It probably would be, yeah. I didn't know you had anything until Randy told me about an hour ago.
It's just,
Do you want to do it now, Mike, since he says he's ready?
Okay. The pointer is up there, Mike.
okay. So this will change it for me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Turn it on. I think it's off. Turn it on.
So as I mentioned, I'm here on behalf of the Rec Committee. We had two events going on just recently. One was a cleanup and one was celebrating National Trails Day.
Turn it on. Is it on?
I'm sorry?
Is it on the side? Let me look.
On the side. Okay.
There you go.
Here we go. Okay, so this is the parks cleanup. This is Schwamwood Trailhead. Greg McAuliffe and Peter Rue cleaning up the trailhead.
Grab the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, I should be over here. Okay. And this is some of the people and some of the stuff that was removed from Schwamwood Park. We have Dewey Jones on the left with Greg McAuliffe, and two gentlemen on the right are from Utah. And what they have in their hands is a broken porcelain toilet that we pulled out of there, out of the trash out of Schwamwood. Here we have Greg McAuliffe dealing with barbed wire. There's still some barbed wire there, and I want to report that we weren't able to get that all out of there, but today Greg went back with wire cutters and he cut the rest of the barbed wire out of there and removed it. Here's another group. Bishop Wynn is in that picture. And here's the crew. Every year we take a picture of the crew with the trash. It's hard to see Pete LaRue's trailer there, but it's full of trash. Here's some of the things that we pulled out of Schwamwood. Tires and metal objects. There's a license plate if anybody wants to track them down. And a sled. The gentleman in the green shirt, that's Todd Caruth. He's the one that's responsible for this cleanup, and he's the one that brings the majority of volunteers to help out every year. Here are the use of we put good use to 3 canopies over there at Lions Field. If you remember that Saturday, we had quite the thunderstorm and quite a bit of rain. So those came in very handy. As you can see, especially in this one, it was pouring rain out there, and those canopies are very helpful. So here's the crew, just waving goodbye, hoping to see you next year, and that's a report on our cleanup. This is National Trails Day, which occurred this past weekend, June 2nd. We've celebrated that since 2007. This is a map we use, Google Earth, but it shows that we cross 5 municipalities from Mishpeming, Negaunee Township, Marquette Township, and the city. We had about at last count, we had 227 registered riders and runners, and that's the largest we've had so far. I didn't get a lot of pictures of our township road crossings because I had other responsibilities I had to keep moving. But we have had the best coverage historically, and it's recognized by the Iron Range Rural Task Force how good Marquette Township has been in providing a safe crossing in all our crossings. So this is the beginning, for those of you that couldn't be in Ishpeming, this is the beginning of the Iron Range Roll. Last Saturday, this is the bicycle start. Oops, how come that's not going? That's supposed to run.
I don't think so.
You got an idea?
It's a PDF, it's not gonna run in that way.
It didn't have the movie in it?
No.
Okay, so much for the movie. Well, there's 2 movies. There was that one, and there was the Running Start movie. But with that, I want to come back to safety and recognize the fact that we have north and south trails here, and that this connection is very important. I want to thank the board, first of all, for their support in using the boardroom on our cleanup day. We were here for about 20 minutes, and also want to thank them for supporting the underpass, because this shows the connection between north and south Marquette trails that will occur utilizing this. So thank you for your time, attention, and support, and the rec committee hopes to be doing the same 2 events next year.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for putting that together.
Lynn?
Yes, sir.
Just
Go
got one
ahead.
question. How did it compare this year as far as rubbish and everything to past years?
That's a good question. I'm glad you asked that, because every year it seems like there's less.
Better and better.
So we are getting less trash back there. But there's always going to be the plastic bags that blow in from the retailers to the north of there. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks to all the volunteers, too. Okay, that was still public comment, so if anybody else wants to comment, you're welcome to. Okay. Any board member comment in response to the public comment? No, we're good. Okay, on. Next up is the consent agenda. Tonight, that will consist of approval of the regular meeting minutes of May 15th, the joint work session with Marquette Township Business Association minutes of May 15th, and the work session CIP discussion of May 22nd. Bills payable in the amount of $128,775.59, and a budget amendment 2018-05, so we will do a roll call vote on that, and Randy will read that. Received committee and other reports tonight, including the sheriff's report from April, fire department officers meeting minutes of April 9th, the business meeting of the same night, officers meeting draft minutes of May 14th, and the business meeting of the same night. The utility billing calendar for June, my report from the supervisor. Correspondence not requiring board action tonight is correspondence from Michigan Township Power Plan and our, seems like, bi-monthly charter communication. In this case, it is our fee payment. So that's a good thing. They didn't change any channels this time. So I just need approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Support?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Roll call vote.
Oh, that's right. I just said that.
So the budget amendment is 2018-05, and the authorization is requested to reallocate expenditures in the general fund, the approved budget for travel conference, which was the MTA conference, in the board and supervisor department totals $3,150. Supervisor was the only attendee in the aforementioned, expending $850. $2,300 can be used for attendance at the MTA UP Summit in August. So,
And I did send that to you today, so if anybody that couldn't get to MTA especially wants to go.
I'm
just
certainly going to try.
Let Randy know. It's only a couple days. Okay. Now you're welcome.
okay, Trustee Marks,
Yes.
Trustee Everson,
Yes?
Trustee Wiegand,
Yes.
Treasurer Johnson,
Yes.
Clerk Rattari is yes, and Supervisor Durant.
Yes.
That motion carries 6-0, one absent.
Okay, that's the consent agenda. Any changes to the regular agenda that we know of? Okay, then I just need approval for that.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And I haven't heard any conflict of interest on this agenda, so we'll keep going. Privileged comment. Did you gentlemen want to speak first, or are we waiting for the presentation? Okay.
All right, I've got the buttons figured out. Hi, my name is Andrea Ingmeyer. I'm the library director for the Peter White Public Library. And I'm here today to do our annual report and then also talk about the future of library services here in Marquette Township. So first of all, I want to thank you for your continued support of the Peter White Public Library. I think we have a great partnership. And if you haven't been out to the mall temporary library yet, you should go check it out. Our youth services department is over at the Westwood Mall, and it's a lovely little branch library that we have during construction. So we always start with programming. It's a big part of what we do at the library. And this schedule that I have up here on the screen today is next week's schedule. And the majority of the events will be taking place in the mall. The mall has been gracious enough to let us not only use the store that we're located in, but also some of the larger events are held in the larger stores that are open. So it's been really nice to have some flexibility with how many people we can accommodate at our programming. So these statistics are from funding year 16-17. That's the most recent completed fiscal year. In that fiscal year, our average attendance at children's programming was just under 1,500 a month, which is pretty impressive. Teen programming at about 140 a month. I wanted to talk a little bit about Prime Time. It's one of our special programs that the Youth Services Department facilitates. And what's really great about that program is we are targeting low-income, low-literacy families and teaching them how to read with your children. So it's not just kids coming in and hearing a story from our staff, it's actually working with their parents. So it's a really great program. It's 6 weeks long. They come in on Saturdays. This last year we had 25 families come, and we've had some really great success. Our program is one of the flagships for the state of Michigan and actually for the Michigan Humanities with that program. We also have a lot of adult and general programming. We see about 540 or so adults a month for our adult programming. I've got a picture of the telescope that was donated to the library for circulation. That was donated by the Marquette Astronomical Society, and they donated it to the library so that patrons could check it out, take it home, look at the night sky on their own. And it's been very successful. It's kind of actually led us down a new programming or collections route with regard to a library of things. We have 2 ukuleles that are being cataloged right now that were also donated. So we're expanding what we're checking out to more than just the typical library materials. And we've had a lot of interest in expanding that service. This is just a general overview of programming stats. This is attendance. So the blue is fiscal year 15-16, and then the red is 16-17. And you can see we had a pretty good jump in children's services, and the rest of them stayed remotely, close statistics-wise. But none of this would be possible without our partnerships. We've developed a number of wonderful community partnerships over the years. This is Snowbound Books. They come to a lot of our big literacy programs. This is actually young authors last year. So they come in and sell the books of the young author who comes to the schools so that the students can also take home some of the literature. But we have so many good partnerships with community organizations. And I have jealous library friends who always say, how can you guys do so many programs? And it's not just us. It's the community coming in and using our facility. And that's how we're able to offer so many programs. So library spaces, our gallery, our Huron Mountain Gallery, is a centerpiece of the library. We have rotating displays that come into that gallery on a monthly basis, and we also participate in the Smart Prize. And but we don't just have displays in the gallery itself. We've added some art display in the teen services. That's the picture on the left. And that was one of the MAPS schools' art shows. So they came and let the students also display at the library, which gets them more exposure, which is really great. On the right-hand side, that's one of our display cases, and it's filled with random collections from people in the community. Right now, I think there are fishing lures in it, historical fishing lures, so it can be anything that people are interested in showing. And we hear from people all the time that they just appreciate having the space. They like having a place they can go and wait for their kids in between sporting events. After school, the kids can come, and it's the whole idea of the third space, the place where you're not at work, you're not at home. It's an important third space for our community. Meeting room usage has been really high. The last fiscal year we had 1,700 uses of our meeting rooms, and that's up 300 from the last fiscal year. We are adding meeting spaces with our renovation, which I'll talk a little bit about here. So that number is just going to continue to climb, and it's something that we're told time and time again that patrons really appreciate. Some pictures from the Westwood Mall branch. We had Cameron Zavara, who was a magician, and he came in, and that program was held in the old MC Sports store, and was a great space for holding that program. Talk a little bit about specific township services. Again, thank you so much for your continued cooperation with the library. We're often held up as kind of a model of how partnerships can work, not only with our programming, but also the relationships we have with both the city and the township entities. And that's a picture of the Westwood Mall branch, all decked out. It is the old Vanity store, if that helps you locate us in the mall. Excuse me. Just a few statistics. These are all of our townships that we have contracts with, and Marquette Township there, we run about 46% in Marquette Township of population to card holders. And I'm often asked how accurate that statistic is, and I think actually it's a little bit underrepresented. Just using my own family as an example, we live in Sands Township. There are 4 of us in the household. We have 1 library card. I think a lot of times parents are trying to cut out any room for error, and so they would rather use 1 card so they know exactly what everybody's got out at any given time. But as statistics are, they're as accurate as we can make them. And Dropbox statistics. This is something that varies widely year to year. It depends on who's living where, whether or not it's convenient for them to use Dropboxes, whether they just come to the library. But we're told that people really do appreciate it. So you'll see Sands is down significantly, but Scandia is up also significantly between 2016 and 2017. So really it just varies on who is using the Dropboxes and what their needs are. Something that's kind of exciting, we're working with Sands Township to develop a holds pickup program. So they'll be our first township to work on not only the book drop return, but also a pickup. So patrons will be able to call the library, reserve materials that they will then take to Sands, and they can pick up at the Sands Township Hall rather than coming all the way into Marquette. So planning for the future, we revised our strategic plan this year. It's something we've been working on for a couple years, started with the space renovation, and then led into more of the strategic planning process. We developed 6 areas of strategic focus, and they're listed there for you. But the overarching idea that came out of our strategic plan is the need to do more outside of the building. I think we do a really fantastic job of providing services within the walls of Peter White. But what we're noticing is that a lot of our townships would like a little more from us. So we're investigating ways that we can bring programming out to the townships, that we can bring materials out to the people where they're at. We all know that in the winter, sometimes travel can be a little tricky. So we're trying to facilitate the library use outside of the walls as well as within. This year, we also revised our mission statement. It's pretty simple. I think it encapsulates pretty well who we are and what we do. We had a pretty wordy mission statement before, and we felt like it didn't necessarily cut to the chase well enough. We wanted our staff to be able to just say it off the top of their head. So we came up with this one. We feel like it really says who we are and what we do. Looking at financial stability, in 2017, the library board kind of came up with a 5-year plan. I'm sure you all are dealing with the same issues we are, and that funding seems to be going down at a time when people need more from us. So the board, we had a couple budget planning sessions and really narrowed in on what our plan of attack was going to be. I'm asked just about twice a week on average when Sunday hours are going to come back. So that's one thing that the library board is really serious about implementing again. And so the first part of this plan was to work on the building. We had some pretty serious building concerns with the 1904 structure. So in August of getting ahead of myself here. In August of 2017, we did ask the City of Marquette residents for a capital improvement bond renewal, and 80%, they voted 80% yes. So that renovation has started. The focus of the renovation, again, are those major building repairs, creating cost savings through efficiencies, and creating expanded services for popular programs and services, namely youth services. Our youth services department downstairs is really changing, and people are really excited about it. We're adding space for tweens, which are the older elementary kids that aren't ready to go up to the teen area. We're adding a dedicated programming room for youth services, and we are expanding the room itself a little bit. I passed out a handout that had the Library Insider information, but you can also get to that from our website. It's on the main page. If you want to see images of the project as it's going through, if you want to just have the updates, the regular updates, we're doing just about one a week. Sometimes it's a little more, sometimes there's nothing to report, so there hasn't been one. But the Library Insider is the way that we're using to communicate what's happening with the building project, what progress is being made, what we're finding out as they uncover, as the historic restoration folks come in and take a look at the structure, and all of those kinds of details. So if you're interested in signing up, you just put in your email there, and you'll get the emails. So another part of our financial stability is continued and expanded services to the townships. We want to make sure that we are offering the services that our townships want. And we've got our Chocolate, Sands, Scandia, and West Branch townships. We have service contracts through 2020. And of course, with Marquette Township, we would like to be on the ballot again in November for a service renewal with Marquette Township. In 2016, the Marquette Township residents did approve our ballot measure with 77% yes. Also want to talk a little bit about the Headley Amendment and the Headley Override. We are working with some of our townships to put a Headley Override on the ballot. And a quick recap of what a Headley Amendment is and the Headley Override. The Headley Amendment limits local government revenue growth by rolling back the tax millage collected. And then the Headley Override is the process by which a organization can ask for a vote, a ballot issue, which asks taxpayers to reset that millage. This is our current contracted or chartered millage rates, the middle numbers there, and then the actual rates collected, and you'll see it varies pretty widely. Chocolate Township, I think the 2018 rates are actually even a little bit lower for Chocolate, so they're under a quarter mil, and that varies all the way up to Scandia Township, which is almost a full mil. One thing that the Headley or the Headley Override would do that I think would be beneficial is that it would shrink that gap between the what different townships are paying as far as their millage goes. So why each entity is different? There's different growth in different townships, and it's all specific to the service area. So that's why some of them are really a really big rollback, and some of them are not as big of a rollback. So Chocolate Township, Sands Township, and the City of Marquette have all agreed to put a Headley Override on the ballot for us in November of 2018. We are also going to be on the ballot in Powell Township for expanded services up there. We did have services in Powell Township in 2010, and then it failed again in 2014. So we are initiating that service again with Powell Township. They have expanded internet now with the NMU LTE project, and they are really interested in some of our resources. So that's going to be on the ballot also in November. So what are we asking from Marquette Township? Well, first and foremost is a service contract renewal. We would like to be on the ballot in November, and we would also like the township to consider a Headley Override. We think that there's some real benefit in the services that we offer the residents, and we'd like you to take that under consideration. So this is an estimate of impact to taxpayers. This is assuming $150,000 property value. And we all know this changes depending on the homeowner's property value, but this is kind of the average. So we're using a number that's easy to compare to what you own. So the Headley Override impact for a property value of $150,000 is $7 a year for Marquette Township. You can see in Chocolate Township it's significantly more, $20 a year, and that's based again on that Headley rollback amount. So it's always nice to compare these things to what we do on our daily lives. For Marquette Township, that's one child ticket at Thomas Theater. And I tell you, it never comes with just the ticket costs because you always have to have popcorn. So we think it's a pretty modest increase for the amount of benefit that residents can receive from the library. So why is the library asking for this? Again, we're looking at maintaining service levels, and we would really like to bring Sunday hours back. And next steps, obviously, ballot language. And I'm sure you all have questions and all of that. And if our Headley overrides are not successful in 2018, well, each of these different ballot issues are separate. So when we get through the election, we see what passed, what didn't, where are we at, and then we evaluate whether or not we can bring back Sunday hours. But I know that's the thing that everybody wants to know. Is it going to get Sunday hours? Well, there's so many moving pieces, it's hard to say yes or no. We're going to have to wait and see what passes, what doesn't, and then evaluate it. But it is the goal of the board to bring those hours back. I just said all that. Any questions?
Yep, I have a couple.
Sure.
Kind of stiff neck now. I was wondering how you were what your thought was on getting materials to the public. Are you gonna just take the bookmobile kind of and drive around, or they put an order in, or
I wish we had a bookmobile.
Throw them out the window?
Yeah, no, we're already driving to the townships to pick up the book drops. So we'll just be double using that trip for both purposes. So when we're driving out to pick up the book drop materials, we will drop things off. So the idea we have with Sands Township right now is the township is agreeable to handing them out to patrons. So we'll take them out to them, they'll hand them out to the patrons, and then they can return them in the book drop. Does that answer your question well enough?
So
Okay.
you just have somebody in a car and they just go around and,
Yep.
okay. I'm sure the public would be interested in knowing how they would get that if that does come to happen.
We haven't figured out an excellent way to handle it automatically through our integrated library system, our computer system we use for our library function. We're going to start out with just asking people to call, and then we can do it manually. We're hoping that Cersei, that's the vendor for our computer software, can come up with a better plan for us, but right now we're going to start simple.
So at some point, they could maybe get online and put an order in?
Yeah, that's the ultimate hope.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. I just noticed from your little brochure that you handed out, wages and benefits are a huge part of your budget. Do you want to talk about that, or do you have any comments? Or?
It's very standard. The same could be said
67%?
for, the same could be said for school systems. What we offer are our staff. You know, materials are a part of what we offer, but the staff really make it all happen. They're the ones who process the materials, order the materials, do the programming, and we know that in order to keep quality staff, you have to have benefits. So it is a big part of our budget, though.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an observation. Okay. Roger, would you mind giving us just a quick synopsis for the public on the fact that we have a contract and where we are? We have a 4 excuse me, we have a like we were talking the other day, we have the ballot request, and then we have the contract, and just kind of go through that for the public. You can do a better job than I can.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Basically, as the board will recall, and the public will recall, in 2016, you spent a lot of time and discussion in determining whether the library contract should be renewed and what its content should be. In order for a township that does not have a library of its own, it is mandatory that you have a contract in order to receive services. You entered into a contract in 2016 that was a 2-year contract. However, it provides for one unconditional or automatic renewal. So if the board's consensus would be to continue to provide library services to the residents of Marquette Township, no action needs to be taken on that because it will renew automatically. The only other option you have would be there was built in, because nobody knew at the time, and nobody still knows what the future holds in finances, so there was a provision that if something unforeseen should come up, that the board has the prerogative of terminating that contract. However, that must be given with 6 months' notice, so that would have to occur if you were going to invoke that by June 30. Your other, in 2016 at least, the consensus was to build in that one automatic renewal and to really re-engage and re-look at the contract issue in 2020, which would be at the end of 4 years. Assuming the board would wish to continue the library contract services, then you have the decision of whether to implement the Headley override. Essentially, right now in Marquette Township, that's at roughly 0.9 mils. There's a roughly 0.1 mil rollback over the years since the 1 mil millage was first adopted. Anytime that the millage differential from the original millage to the rollback amount is less than half a mil, that may be included in one ballot proposal. It does not have to be. It can be either 2 ballot questions or a separate ballot question. Example, Because it's less than half a mil, at least the Michigan Township Association's interpretation of the statute governing it is that you could have one millage question on the ballot that says, shall the millage be renewed at 1%? And there's the question on whether that's technically a renewal or a new millage when you have the increase. You could also have the renewal as a separate ballot proposal and the differential of the roughly 0.1 mils as a separate ballot question. If the township board wishes to move forward with the second 2 years of the ballot proposal, then a minor revision would be necessary to the contract if you also want to have the Headley override, because your contract specifically states that each year it will be placed on the ballot each year you have the contract, or each 2-year period, at the Headley rollback amount. That is a very quick and simple amendment that can be made. And that basically, those are your action options at this point. But you must have a contract in order to receive services. You do have a contract. You spent a great deal of time forging ahead and arriving at that contract just 2 years ago. And then it's basically almost the equivalent of a referendum, if you will, that the people then can either vote to have it, the millage renewed or not renewed, or the increase implemented or not implemented, depending on whether it's a 2-ballot question or a 1-ballot question.
So, excuse me, where I got confused in this too is that this is being levied in 19 for 18, correct?
Well, it's being levied in 2018. So
yes, that's
your millage proposal that you passed last time was for tax years 2016 and 2017. So as of right now, the millage is expired, but the millage is then collected for 2017 during 2018. So your contract that you have provides, for example, that the library, the treasurer is to provide the millage proceeds to the library by May 1st or thereabouts, to the extent possible. So just real recently that should have occurred, but that is actually money that was levied from the 2017 millage. So your ballot proposal under the contract would be for 2018 and 2019 millage levies, and those would be levied at the end of the year on the December tax bills, but they would not actually be collected because your tax bills aren't due until February, until the years 19 and 20. So from the library's perspective, the important dates are 19 and 20 because that's when they receive the money. From the township's perspective, the important dates are 18 and 19 because that's when you levy the millage and that's when you send the tax bills. Does that answer what you're asking?
I needed that clarity for everybody.
Can I add a comment on
Sure.
to what Roger said too? I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Headley override has to be indicated in ballot language that it's a new millage. So even if you have the renewal, that part can say it's a renewal, but anything that's new has to state in the ballot language that it's that part, regardless of it, if it's one question or two, has to be written in as a new millage. Is that right?
We were talking about that last year.
It is.
Yeah.
There's the statute itself governing any millage proposals, increases, renewals in the General Property Tax Act, the tax code, doesn't address that specifically, and there's a difference of opinion on the issue of when it's less than half a mil. That the knockdown is from Headley.
Okay. Any board issues, comments, questions, motions, whatever?
Well,
John?
of the attorney, either the township or the library, under the contract in Section 4, they're the ones, either one, can serve 6 months' notice and terminate the contract.
That is correct. I painted it as being a township decision because we've just heard the library indicate that it is not wishing to invoke that, but that's correct.
Well,
Either side may invoke that.
We don't know that. That's something I'd like to find out tonight. If the library doesn't want to do it, then the options are up to the township. Will the revision of going back, getting rid of the Headley, does that require that the township give 6 months notice and terminate this so that you can do that?
It would be my opinion it does not. It would
does not?
require a very simple amendment to the existing contract. To the other, and I don't have it directly in front of me, perhaps
all
it's
right.
Section 3, that just specifies what the rate would be levied at. We would just change that. And it would apply for only essentially one time, because the contract does essentially expire in 2020, in 2 years, in which case you being the township board has to address what are we then going to do moving forward.
Okay. For the board's information and for the public, we have here a very serious financial situation that we're facing going into the next year. We have a need for a fire department vehicle replacement proposal that's contemplated to be put on the ballot, somewhere in the neighborhood of 0.6 of a mil. That's one. We have another Sheriff's Department Police Patrol supplement proposal that's been considered at 0.4 of a mil or greater, and that's to be on the ballot. The Township Board has to also consider, as far as I'm concerned, whether these two ballot proposals that are absolutely required if our township is to provide and maintain the present level of service, safety, and welfare presently enjoyed. They have to think about what they're doing by acting on this on behalf of the library. And it's the library for this, that's the city of Marquette Library, and often referred to by their commissioners as their premier community center. All of that needs to be thought of in terms of the action you're planning here.
Okay. Any other board member comment? We do have a couple people who'd like to make their comments known, but I wanted to give us a chance first. Ernie?
One comment, and as our attorney said, that when we actually levy the taxes and collect the funds and that, in the past it has been May 1st when we try to get them to. We have changed that at the beginning of the year, so it follows the same thing as all the rest of them. By the 15th of each month or thereabouts, every 2 weeks, and that we are sending it to them at this point in time. And I believe you're getting that on a regular basis now.
We are, thank you.
That's good information. So the 15th of each month?
We go the
Or every
15th
couple
or every
weeks?
2 weeks, whatever comes back in that too. So
Okay.
by law, it should be the 15th and the end of the month for everything else. And in the past, it was always around the May 1st that we're sending all the funds to them. And we changed this to last week. It made it easier on staff. They didn't have to worry about it. They were the same program as all the other entities that we collect money for. So every 2 weeks, whatever it works out, they get the same dollars, whatever's out there. So.
Okay. Thanks for that update. Okay, nothing else right now? Okay, Doctor, do you want to share your thoughts at the podium?
Have you moved ahead to the agenda item about the library?
Do you want to wait till then and not now? That's fine. Maybe I misunderstood. Okay. Yeah, I had you here. Paul, did you want to wait too for our discussion? Okay. Okay. Anything else for Andrea? Good. Thank you. You're welcome. All right, let me just rewrite that. Okay, I'm going to keep my notes straight. Okay, next up is community linkage. Tonight we're going to talk about the Planning Commission response to the 2018 Community Survey. And Jason McCarthy, Planner and Zoning Administrator, is here. You do have a copy of the proposed draft for the community survey. It has been updated with those items that the board had asked for. Did you have anything for Jason right away, or should I turn him loose? Okay. Go ahead, Jason.
Keep it real simple. We made the 2 adjustments to the survey, the draft survey that you had recommended, one being the removal of question 13 regarding a question about medical marijuana, and we added if funded by a proposed millage to the end of question number 9. So with that, we're hoping that the board will concur with the Planning Commission's recommendation to move this forward so that we can distribute the survey as soon as possible.
And a cover letter was requested, so we got that.
Oh, yes.
And
Thank
so,
you.
like I said, yeah, your packet does have a copy of the survey in there. Any other, yeah, Dave?
Wasn't that from the last meeting? From the last meeting, wasn't that already approved for distribution with the changes?
I thought the motion said, yeah, once it was done.
Yeah, staff was surprised that it was back on the agenda too. So we held off on distributing it until we made sure that you guys are kosher with the draft.
Okay.
So we really don't need any action tonight?
Yeah, I don't think so, because I think it said contingent on making those changes or something. I thought maybe there's something new too.
Nothing new.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tomorrow, 8 o'clock. Get it out. Thank you. Thanks for staying too, Jason. Okay. Now we're down to policy discussion, consideration, and development. So, did you want to speak now? Because this is where the board's going to listen to what you say before we deliberate, if we do. Just name and address again, please, Carl, for the record.
Carl Hammerstrom, 33 Middle Island Point Road. I wish to speak in behalf of the library director, Andrea, and Mary Davis, who is our township representative on the Township Advisory Board. My wife and I visit the library weekly or more often, and have been very pleased with the service that we get. As retired persons, we now have the ability to read for our enjoyment and our continued learning, and get very good response from the library. If I read an editorial in a newspaper and there's a comment about a book that I feel that I should read, I can call the adult services and they can either borrow it from another library quickly, it may become available to me electronically, or they purchase the book if they feel that it's something that should be added to the library. Often I have that book within a week. The library is a busy place, and it's very well maintained. And the work that's going ahead to repair that elderly building is being well done. The board of the library is, in my opinion, doing a very good job, and they are readily accessible. It's my understanding that the library board is meeting with the trustee representatives this week in order to discuss the ballot proposals that will be going on in the various townships. As regards to our township, I strongly urge you to utilize the ability within the current contract to approve 2 more years without additional ballot. In addition, I'd like you to consider making a commitment to the library for more than 2 years at a time. It takes you a lot of effort. There's costs involved for the library, and many of the library township affiliates have a 5-year commitment. In other communities, it's an ongoing understanding, and unless there is to be a change in millage, the contracts renew automatically. I strongly encourage you to do that because your time is valuable. There's no question. I noticed that in the survey that's going to the township this year, there are no questions about the library. From that, I assume that you understand the strong support of the library that the township population has. So I strongly encourage you to go ahead with the automatic renewal. I strongly urge you to consider among yourselves an alternative that when the 2020 ballot proposal comes up, that we have a longer term, not less than 5 years. There's no need to discuss these matters every 2 years. The community strongly supports the library. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Pardon me.
Paul Marin, 274 Eagles Nest Road. All of you who are sitting here, except Mr. Gerard, Mr. Zappa, are sitting here because the voters, in their wisdom, decided you should be sitting here. And I assume all of you, because you are sitting here, agree that the voters chose wisely by selecting you to represent our interests. My strong opinion is you can never go wrong by allowing the voters to decide. You can go wrong if you keep something from the voters. You can go wrong if you think you're protecting the voters from themselves, but you could never be wrong if you allow the voters to decide. Let the voters decide. They may say yes, they may say no, but you will have done your jobs. You will have let the voters speak, and they spoke by putting you here, and they will speak by deciding whether or not Headley should be overridden or not with respect to library services. Now, one thing Mr. Marks said that I take exception to a certain extent, that it's the city of Marquette's library. I've lived in the township now, well, our house was built, started 9/11/2001, an inauspicious day to start construction, but it's been a happy home for us in the township. I think of it as my library in the township. We had visitors yesterday from Ann Arbor, and they wanted to see some of the sites in the town. So we came into town after dinner last night. We stopped at 3 places. We stopped at Presqu'île, went around there, got out at the Black Rocks. We went to the cathedral. The husband's a devout Roman Catholic, and he was very interested in seeing the inside of the cathedral. And we stopped at the library. And they loved all three places that we stopped. And I didn't say to them, we're going to take you to the city of Marquette's library. I said, I want you to see our library, because it really is the library of all the stakeholders, including the residents of this township, who have overwhelmingly approved support of the library. And so I would urge you, as Dr. Hammerstrom did, to the extent that you can make decisions that eliminate the need for voting on this, great. To the extent you can't, and I don't know that you can with respect to the Headley override, I suspect that's got to be on the ballot, but I'm not a municipal lawyer, as is Mr. Zappa. I ask you to just let the voters make the decision. To the extent you can make it, make it. To the extent you can't, turn it over to the voters. They voted you in. They'll decide wisely on whatever's put in front of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Board, comments, suggestions? Anybody?
Further comments?
Mm-hmm.
The only reason that I referred to it as the City of Marquette Public Library is because the City of Marquette Library does not permit a non-resident, even though they are a library contributor of size, to be in their appointed office. You can't serve on the Public Library of Marquette board unless you're a city resident. So that's the justification. Ours is taxation without representation because we don't get to serve there. We get to have somebody on the Township Advisory Board, but I can tell you from experience on that board that even the chair of that committee, when they sit at the board of the public library itself, when you're introduced to guests, they introduce you, even as a chair, as being someone who doesn't have a vote. So for whatever that's worth, that justifies, as far as I'm concerned, saying that that truly is, and they want to keep it that way because they have perpetuity in the structure of their formation. Perpetuity that they don't even have to go back to their own constituents for an election.
Thanks, John. Anybody else? Dave?
I got to say that over the last couple of years, I'm impressed with the new outreach that the library is doing and the level of communication that's coming out of the director. And I believe the residents are correct. This issue should be decided by the voters. And I would think that in addition to these items, the discussion items of fire department funding and additional police services funding should all appear on the ballot at the same time and let the voters make a decision. I don't have any problem with that at all. I know there's some budget issues and concerns, but I don't think it's a wise move to cut out library services in favor of anything else, especially when it's got a passing rate at the ballot of 70+%. I don't think that makes any sense if we're really here representing what the residents want.
Anybody else? Ernie?
Listen, Aaron, I have no problem with the library and that, and as far as letting the voters make a choice, that's great. I don't have a problem with it at all. Just some facts. Our taxable value that will go in on this year is $246,437.118, and that. Taking those figures, and last year it was approximately $220,000 that we contribute to the library. This year it's going to be close to $224,000 in that. And when you look at the dollar amounts that we are contributing continually on our township in that, and my biggest concern was Chalkley. And if you looked at what their millage rate was, 0.73, I think it was, in relationship to the township here, that was always a major problem with me, because you look at the statistics here and the statistics in the back, utilization of the library by Chalkley was greater than Marquette Township, but yet our financial contributions to the library by the township residents was greater, a lot greater than that, and strictly because of the evaluation out here, and that's the extent of it. So I have no problem going forward with what we have in a contract at this point in time, and that, and let the people decide, knowing full well that we're going to have to address the two items that Trustee Marks brought up on the fire and on the sheriffs. Those are going to have to be addressed, and the public are going to have to make a decision when it comes down to the ballot as to where they want to put their dollars in that overall. So I'm just trying to put out that the valuation has gone up quite a bit, and I expect it to continue to grow more and more, and so it's going to be lopsided regardless of what millage we put out there, and that's all I have.
Okay. Anybody else? I'll try to do this, sorry.
Randy does.
Allergy season. Oh, yeah, sorry, Randy.
Well, listening to what everyone has spoken about tonight, I did have a resident stop me last week on the street, and when they saw this thing coming on the agenda, and they said, "Don't you take my right away from voting." And I said, I don't think that we should do that. I said, if it passes or if it fails, it doesn't really mean anything to the township board, because our money, we don't see any of that money. That money is basically just a pass-through. We do get a little small administration fee for collecting that. It isn't much, but I'm agree with Trustee Wiegand that let the voters decide. And we do have some other issues, like Trustee Marks has, has spoken about with the fire department and maybe expanded police services. But let the voters decide and let it lay where it goes.
Okay. I agree with what I've heard too so far. John's made some valid points. Representation is the #1 thing for me. That's what I think is the most important somehow. And I don't know that that'll happen in my lifetime or my term, because it's tied into the charter as well as the library structure. But personally, that's what bothers me the most, is not having representation. I believe that, and Jason could correct me, I believe that one of the things that they figured when they were putting the survey together was that wasn't necessary, because it is handled through a ballot right now. Some of the items, some of the questions in the survey, we may have to put on a ballot, such as the public service issues with fire and police, because we need to know what the public wants to do. I don't have a problem putting this back on the ballot at all. I like the 2-year contracts, because we don't know what kind of money we're going to be facing 2, 3, 4 years down the line. But we'll have to address that in 2020. And the other contribution that the public keeps forgetting is that many of these businesses in this community are contributing to the library. I know of one that called me last year when we were talking about this, or 2 years ago, and said, I don't mind doing things for my employees, but why am I sending thousands of dollars to the library when I don't use it? I'm a business, I'm not a resident. So that kind of sticks in the back of my mind, and that's a big part of the inequity in what our township contributes and why it's so high. It's because of the businesses. And I think people need to remember that it's not just the residents, although the residents are the only ones that have a chance to vote. So that's all I had to add. If nobody wants to say anything, I would make a motion to continue the contract for 2 years and leave it at the rolled back Headley. Just leave it as it is.
Well, the proper motion would be to direct the clerk to draft ballot language to continue the millage for 2 years at the current rate.
You're the motion guru. You're better.
I believe
I
that
don't
would.
make motions.
I believe that'd be right. Correct me if I'm wrong, Roger.
That would be an appropriate motion.
Ernie?
You're talking about 18 and 19.
Correct.
We'll be collecting them for 19 and 20, correct? So everyone knows that.
Correct.
Whoever made that motion, I'd support it.
I guess I can direct myself to do that.
Any comments? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No?
2 more years. Okay. Are we good, Roger? We don't have to do anything else, right? Just want to make sure.
I will confer with the clerk and we'll come up with the ballot language.
Okay. Okay, yes.
Just one question for Roger on looking at the contract on, it says the agreement shall automatically be extended. By us voting like this, it's going to be automatically extended then, as written then?
That's correct. The only reason you would have needed an amendment would be if you were going to change the millage rate that is specified in the contract.
Could we have a roll call vote?
We already voted.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, that's why I asked too. I wanted to make sure. Okay, that's all we need on that. Next up is consider proposed short-term rental text agreement, first reading. This falls to Planner McCarthy again.
Good evening again. This is a proposed zoning text amendment to allow for and to regulate the land use of short-term rental in Marquette Township. As you know, this has kind of been a hot button issue around the county. We feature a 4-season recreational destination type lifestyle with beautiful amenities. And this is something that's starting to affect property owners and, you know, quite honestly, taxes in some cases too. Planning Commission feels that this is a quasi-commercial use, whether it's an accessory use or a principal use on the structure. And so the Planning Commission and staff have worked together to come up with some proposed zoning text language. And I know that you guys reviewed this as a first reading at your last meeting, and this is officially another first reading of this language due to a provision that was left in the ordinance because we had actually drafted this language back in 2017, and now it's 2018, and a provision was left in there by accident. We appreciate that. So, and actually, to Lisa today, the provision that was removed was the proposed requirement for a special use permit to have an extra insurance rider for a commercial use. That was struck down by civil counsel, and so we're moving forward with the 3 requirements for a special use permit. So let's just take this in a practical matter. If you wanted to have a special use permit, say in Trustee Everson's home, he would have to submit a special use permit application, pay the fee, and no neighbors within 300 feet would be notified, and there would be a duly called public hearing to have this type of land use take place. And the reason I say that is because there's lots of benefits to having short-term rentals, I guess, from the landowner's perspective of additional income. But along with that, there's also a flip side to that, whether it be, you know, transient families coming in and out of Trustee Everson's home on a monthly, daily, or weekly basis. Perhaps they bring their dogs and they're running amok. Perhaps it's around the 4th of July and they're firing off fireworks. Those are all things that change the character of a neighborhood from a single-family residential neighborhood to something that's more than that. And so one of the reasons that we wanted to utilize a special use permit is because it allows the Planning Commission to approve, deny, or approve the conditions. And one of the conditions could be that, you know, this is reviewed on an annual basis or a biannual basis to see if that particular special use permit for a short-term rental is actually working out and is harmonious with the neighborhood. So I don't know how many questions you may have about this, but I wanted to be present this time, and I was not. I guess I assumed that it would move forward, and it didn't, and I'm glad that Roger had the keen eye to remove that provision. And we're just looking to move forward with this. We feel that it's important to regulate, but to allow it. And we think that this is a good first step. Of course, any zoning text amendment can be adjusted after, you know, a short time of having it in play. But this is something that we'd like the board to consider moving forward so that we can, you know, we don't feel that this is a rampant problem in the township at all. In fact, I don't know really of any that we have in the township. But if you start looking up Eagles Nest Road and that area, you know, some of the higher end residential areas that you want to protect, you know, this is a good provision to do that. We feel that, and the Planning Commission, more importantly, feels that unanimously that this is something that they've worked hard on and that they'd like to move forward with, and they're asking the board for your concurrence.
So Jason, what happens on the other side of it then? Let's say all of Dan's people in the whole neighborhood come out and they all object, everybody within the 300 feet. And what happens then? What can the homeowner expect to have happen?
Well, that question actually came up. You know, what types of arguments would be founded, and then what types of arguments would be like, well, we just don't like Trustee Everson, and we don't want to see him have this provision, or the ability to conduct this type of land use. You know, it's going to take the Planning Commission, who are duly appointed by the board, those members, to kind of wallow through that mire and be able to discern relevant comments from ones that are just personal jabs at Mr. Everson, per se.
Tough crowd.
Any questions?
Like anything else, any other special use permit, you know, you have to be able to discern. We do have, fortunately, a great Planning Commission, and hopefully in the future we will as well. But that's what they're charged to do, and you have to let that process occur.
Randy?
Well, I'd like to commend our Planning Commission on this because I think it was a few weeks ago they were talking about this in Marquette Township, and they had a whole room full of people. And they said, why don't you do what Marquette Township is doing? So I think our plan is pretty well thought out because they were going to do it a little differently, I think, there, which they didn't understand. And apparently the way we're doing it, I think, was appeasing most of the folks. So with that, I'd make a motion to move forward this text amendment as a first reading.
Support.
Okay, we have motion and support. John?
I want to add my 2 cents to, I think that the Planning Commission has done an outstanding job, frankly. At the beginning of this, what I was concerned about was something that I hadn't heard talked about at all, and that's the fact that in a lot of homes, in their family, their greatest savings is their home. Their greatest point, be able to point to what they've accomplished and put aside either for their children or for their retirement, their savings, their family savings, basically for years, for most people, it's been their home. And so you're dwelling on perhaps disrupting the continuity that they've built up over the years in their neighborhood and the importance that they've placed in maintaining their home, because it is their biggest savings. And while I compliment the Planning Commission for the efforts you've made to address most of the issues that could come up and address them properly so that the Planning Commission will have to weigh this as well when they're listening to comments made by people who come in to tell you that it's not working as well as you thought, perhaps. It's because that's their total savings for a lot of people. And so I ask the Planning Commission to keep that in mind as well as you hear, if you are to hear complaints that it's not working and it needs to be addressed. Keep in mind that the people that are talking are people who have a greater interest than just a complaint about a nuisance. It's a threat to their savings. So that's the point I'd like to make. I guess I just urge the Planning Commission to bear that in mind. I know there's wise people there who will take that as a suggestion. But I do compliment the efforts that have been made. I know they're serious. So I thank you for that.
Bernie?
I think it's well done, and it's something that we had to address in that. And the biggest concern I have is that the legislature may decide to take it on, and what we've done is for naught. But we had to do something at this point in time, but the legislature kind of just passed it aside. So now we're addressing it. So it's one of those things, we had to do it, and it may be for naught 6 months from now. But at least we have something on the books.
If we run into issues, we fix them on the road.
Well, that's the question. If you've already got an ordinance in place, or you've already got this plan, we don't know whether future action by the legislature would supersede it, do we?
Well, it most certainly would, because correct me if I'm wrong, Roger, but I don't think we could be more restrictive than what the state law is. And so if the legislature did come through, then we would likely have to repeal what we did. But, you know, they took a whack at it last year, and they didn't get it out of committee. So, you know, it was a hot button issue at the state legislature for, you know, maybe a month or two, and so we reacted. First of all, we appreciate your comments. We, and I say we as staff and the Planning Commission, with all the zoning text amendments we've made, whether it be dark sky lighting or our new sign ordinance or, you know, these types of things, we're often looked to or at and questioned by surrounding municipalities as to how we do things. And that's a testament to the forward thinking of the Planning Commission and the forward thinking of the board, and honestly with the forward thinking of staff, because typically the staff is, you know, the staff's the one that brings these to a head and asks for support to move forward, because we're always trying to be out in front of issues instead of being reactive. We're trying to be proactive. So with respect to your question, and I can let Roger reiterate that, but I believe that we would have to consider repealing it if the state legislature was to come up with something that was less restrictive than what we have, or more restrictive, sorry.
Do you want to add anything, Roger?
Sure. There are two bills pending, one in the House and one in the Senate.
Is that on, Roger? Is your microphone on? Okay.
And they haven't gone anyplace, but the general content of those legislative bills are that any short-term rental use could not be considered a commercial use. It would be considered a residential use. So most of the regulations, or I'm sorry, most of the ordinances that govern short-term rentals try to characterize them as commercial uses. And at the state level, the bills that have been introduced at least are trying to circumvent that or invalidate the local ordinances. In other words, if they're residential uses, they must be permitted. And that's what has been introduced. The wording of your proposed ordinance may or may not have to be revised based on this most recent version. We would just have to keep right in step with that and review the legislation if it comes down, but this could still potentially be consistent or not, depending on what gets attached to any of those bills. Right now, it doesn't look like anything is getting attached to them. They're just not going anyplace. One other very brief comment on the subject. You might recall last September when this came up, I had issued an opinion that was moderately critical of a previous version. And I had a whole long list of things, and all of those things that I was critical of, primarily from an enforcement standpoint, have been removed. So the new ordinance that's before you is pages less than the first one, and it eliminates rental of motorhomes or campers, for example. So.
Roger, do you know if the legislation pending it focuses on the same 90-day when they talk about short-term? Is that the time frame? Or?
I don't believe it does. I believe it just refers to rentals, saying doesn't matter, you can't regulate them as a commercial use. Rentals are a residential use, and they must be allowed.
Okay.
But again, it's not unusual to have 6-8 versions of a bill come through the legislature before you finally get one that a consensus gets reached on by both the House and the Senate and convince the governor to sign. So I hesitate to place too much emphasis on what this one particular bill that's pending says, because it may not even remotely resemble what, if anything, that ultimately gets adopted.
Yeah, I guess a couple points of comfort I take from the way this is written is, first, it gets a fire inspection every 2 years, and a business license is associated with that. So it gets the planning administrator to take a second look at every 2 years and make sure that everything's running the way it's supposed to be running. Obviously, anything can happen and things can start to go south on any type of rental, and if that happens in this case, we get to take another look at it every 2 years and make a decision on whether we're going to continue to let it run or not. So that makes things a little easier.
Ironically, during the time that we were drafting this language, or at least revisiting it after the state legislature failed to move forward, if you remember, we did have that fire on Wright Street where we lost a young couple, and that was a rental property, which unfortunately was in the city. But it just reiterates our job is to protect health, welfare, and safety, and we feel that this zoning text amendment does that.
So are we required to actually have a second reading for the public's? Okay, just want to make sure in case somebody wanted to actually just recommend it. Okay, and this is the first, it's just like you said, the first reading. Okay, we had a motion. Did we get a second?
Yep.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be a roll call, this one.
Because it's first. Anything else? Any other comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. There's the first reading. Now, is there a time frame? Do we just do this at the next meeting for the second
meeting.
reading? Okay. So that needs to be on the next agenda. Okay. Got that for next year, or next week, next meeting.
But Dan has to wait for another 2 weeks before he can run his property.
Yeah. All right, discussion of Michigan Department of Natural Resources trail rerouting proposal. Falls to Jason again.
So the DNR has approached us with a proposal to reroute a section of the trail which would connect from the Iron Ore Heritage Trail north to the south end of the tunnel. And that diagram is in your packet. although it's quite rudimentary at this point, because what the DNR is waiting for before they move forward with anything is to get the consensus of the township board. We ran this through the Recreation Committee, through the Planning Commission. They both unanimously supported this relocation. A couple of the reasons, if you can see this, is that Menards often piles their snow on this side, in which case some of it falls down onto where the proposed trail would have been. And another reason is that the northern natural gas gas line runs north to south in this vicinity, and you have that, of course, that green, what do you want to call it, the retention pond for Menards. We've avoided that, and we've avoided the gas line in this area, but we really like to avoid the gas line along the southeast portion of the Menards property line. On the next page in your packet, you'll see that the master plan for Schwemmwood Park in 2013 featured a very similar and rudimentary line on the western edge of the Marquette Township Schwemmwood Park property, denoting a potential future connection to the tunnel. So we feel that this is in line and in par with the master plan update. Will it affect and take away a portion of the park from some passive usage during the winter months? It will, but we feel that the benefit is much greater, and that the logistics in hammering this out will be much easier if the DNR is allowed to use a portion of our property. As you remember, there's been a lot of property owners that have been very gracious in allowing us to have easement on their property, and we would hope that the township board would concur to use a small portion of Marquette Township property to make this project happen. So we're asking for that. If the board moves forward, what will happen next is that the DNR will go ahead and survey and topo that area, and we'll have a much more definitive area. My direction to the DNR was to use as close to that western boundary as possible to protect and preserve the majority of the Schwemmwood Park property that we have for passive use.
You probably can't bring that up on the screen, can you?
I think I can. I do have a packet.
Yeah, I didn't really want to put it on slides because, you know, it does show a tentative location, but it, like I said, it's not extremely accurate, and there may be some small changes laterally based on the topography in that area, but it's much more conducive than the gas line and the, I don't want to say politics, but the, you know, the policies that the gas line has as far as the easement of their existing easement. It's, you know, their direction to us was, you know, we would prefer you not to be on our easement at all, but if you have to use a portion of it, maybe we can give you 10 feet. So we're really whittling down this this trail segment to be as, I guess, what's the unabated as possible with regard to just getting it in place and getting the easement language done. So that they would secure easement from us, and I would work with Roger to come up with that language. We probably already have some boilerplate stuff that we can put together, but really it's just a logistical thing, and we really want the DNR to be able to utilize a portion of the trail. And I think it's helpful from just a popularity or you know, just to be able to brag to say that, you know, we have a portion of Trail 14 going through a Schwemmwood Park property, so it's, maybe we can get some help in the future for maintenance and upkeep.
I don't know if you could hold that first map up and John could kind of zoom in on it, just because it's such a small hiccup. It's not a big, I don't think it's a big deal. Can you see that, John? Okay, thank you. It's just that little burp right there, that the change.
Just a small segment, but we didn't want to give the go-ahead without having the board chime in on it.
Yeah, and we can see it, but the public can't. Dave?
I'd make a motion to approve the proposed rerouting and direct staff to move forward with the
Okay, we have motion and support. Any other comments or questions? Randy?
The only comment is this should have been only one agenda item instead of two. It's kind of split.
Actually, Andra put it on there because she thought we had to have two issues, and I didn't go back.
The consideration and the other vote, the thought.
Okay.
Yeah. So as far as I'm concerned, we can put them together. But anything else for Jason or Roger? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Thank you for your continued support of this important
You're
community
welcome.
project. Thanks.
Thanks for doing that, Chase. Next up is E, consider staff policy request regarding personnel policy revisions.
In a very brief nutshell, the whole purpose of this basically is in the second paragraph in the memo. The requested revisions are predicated on staff requests for policy exemption resulting from participation in sporting activities that often result in firearms being in personal vehicles, and recent revisions to Michigan statutes and regulations regarding general carry, possession, and transport of firearms in areas as prescribed by law. Basically, what it amounts to is you have currently two policies, the township facilities policy and disciplinary policy, that prohibit any kind of firearm on township property or premises. You heard the comment earlier when we were talking about some of the recreational activities with Jason and Mike that we're an outdoor-oriented location. Sports and outdoor recreation are a large part of what our staff engage in a significant segment of our staff population engage in hunting, fishing, and competitive shooting sports that many times results in them being restricted in being able to participate in those activities because they can't have their firearms in their vehicles so they can go directly to it. They have to go somewhere else to retrieve them. So that's the basis for the request, is to remove just the two small red items, basically specifically identifying the prohibition against firearms and other weapons. Leaves all of the other provisions in place. Any kind of violence basically is addressed. It's just the simple possession on township property and premises.
John?
Move to adopt the proposed revisions to policies as presented.
Second. Support.
Motion and support. Ernie?
Now, does this mean, for my clarification, that someone with some kind of a weapon can retain it in their vehicle under lock and key, only on their vehicle? They will not bring it on duty here?
Yeah, there would be a separate work rule that would go along with this that would address that specifically. There would be requirements that would have to be met for them to be able to do that. For instance, if they're involved in a sporting activity, hunting, fishing, whatever, they would have to provide a copy of a valid license that provides the opportunity for them to do that. If they have a CPL, for instance, a concealed pistols license, I need to have a copy of that on file. And there's going to be a work rule that would plug those holes, basically. In other words, if somebody's not going to come in and prop a shotgun up in the corner because they're going to go bird hunting later, it has to be secured, has to be restricted access to anybody else. Nobody else could have it. So those rules would be in place and they'd have to be documented.
So it'll just be in their personal vehicle?
Not in township vehicles.
Right. Not on township property at all?
Correct.
The vehicle may be on township property, but will be within their vehicle.
And that's what happens, basically, is that their personal vehicles are parked on township property or premises, locked, secured in the vehicle. This would allow that to occur.
And does it stretch it to carry if you are licensed to do that in the building?
That would be a separate rule that the
As
board
this-
would have to address. This does
stands
not
right now.
necessarily do that, no.
Okay.
Will they have to notify you or someone that it is?
Yes. Yeah, that would be part of the rule, the work rule. If you're going to, for instance, if I'm going to be going bird hunting after work, let's say, I would have to let the supervisor know that I've got the shotgun secured in my truck or my car or whatever, but it does have to be secured, has to be unavailable to anybody else.
Anything else for the manager? We have a motion and support. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. I know staff appreciates that. Consider amendment of the DDA boundaries. And we also have kind of a duplicate again of the adoption of the amendment. So whether those need to be separate or not.
Yeah, kind of. Basically, what we're following is we're following a very strictly prescribed process. Basically, as you'll recall, the last action you had on this was a public hearing that was 60 days ago. There's a provision in the act, and Council Zappa can respond to any more detailed questions that you have. But in essence, there was a requirement that not less than 60 days would you be able to consider the question of whether or not you intend to expand the boundaries. And that would take two actions, basically. First of all, would be an action for the board to say, yes, we intend to go forward with this, or no, we don't. If it were no, we don't, that ends the process. If your provision is to go forward, to say, yes, we are amending the boundaries as recommended, then your next step would be to adopt the revised ordinance. And then we would have to go through the posting and the notification process and all the remaining aspects that would basically target sometime by the end of July to have the ordinance actually be in place.
Dave.
I will defer to Roger.
That's basically an accurate summary. This is, if you are deciding to move forward, your first reading of the proposed ordinance, because
Correct.
it is an ordinance amendment. But you have the map that shows the new proposed boundaries, and that's the same map that was considered for the public hearing, and was the subject of considerable discussion and debate among, with the DDA in reaching the recommendation they presented. The Township Board has the authority to remove properties from these proposed boundaries and still move forward with an ordinance amendment, but you do not have the ability to add any properties to the proposed boundaries without starting all over from scratch, keeping in mind that this has been an ongoing process for Marquette Township.
Part of 2 years.
Well, at
This
least
one.
since we came up with a final determination or a semi-final determination of what the boundaries would be for at least 7 months.
Okay, Ernie?
Question for Roger. What would be the correct motion for doing this?
Well, you're just having a first reading right now, so the ordinance itself is, there's an amendment to the ordinance
Item G.
that I've prepared, and that's what you're looking at potentially adopting.
At this meeting?
Yeah, you have items F and G. Item F is your determination as to whether or not you are going to amend the boundaries. And if that decision is yes, then your next action would be G, which would be to consider the first reading of the amended ordinance.
So we have two motions here.
Okay. Yeah, I had already called on them before. Go ahead.
I'd make a motion to approve the amendment of the DDA boundaries.
So,
Support?
Any other questions or comments? Do we need a roll call on this because it's,
No.
all in favor?
aye.
Opposed? Okay, that one's done.
No, and the next one, is there ordinance number on it, or that will take place?
The ordinance is typically the date of adoption, the ordinance number.
But that wouldn't be, is it on the first reading too then?
Second reading.
Oh, that's what I
So if you were to hypothetically place it on your June 19 agenda, it would be ordinance 061918. Thereby amending, let's see, it's actually going back to 1986 is when the first,
040886.
when the first DDA boundaries were set.
So you're making the motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Do I
You
have a
know, we
second?
beat it to death for like 2 years. We accept this as the first reading.
Motion and support. Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Agenda for the 19th.
Okay, put that.
And that will be a roll call vote at that time, because
Be a
it's an
new
ordinance.
ordinance,
and then
correct.
And that'll take, what, how many days after, because it's an ordinance, we have, what, X number of days?
Well, this is even different because there's very specific provisions under the DDA requirements.
It has to be published within 30 days after adoption.
Right.
It's generally effective upon publication.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Okay. That one. Yeah, this is hard enough without having to cough. Pardon me. Consider increase of CIP baseline amount. This falls to Randy again.
Randy. Oh.
You're up.
Well, currently, the baseline amount's $5,000. The board had been discussing CIP for quite some time, but possibly increasing that baseline amount to $10,000, I believe was the last discussion that would be coming back through the CIP process if the board wishes to do that.
Randy?
I'll move to increase the CIP amount to $10,000.
Support?
Dave? Or were
was
you
it.
going to make the
Nope.
motion? Okay.
My only comment is the reason we raised it is because this amount was very outdated. It was like 20 years old, so.
Well, and this is just, go ahead.
Effective when?
Immediately.
Immediately? Okay.
Yes.
This is just, I think, I thought of it more from the public works standpoint because most of our other departments don't end up asking for that kind of money unless it's something special project, but.
And realistically, most of the things that were being considered at the $5,000 level 10, 15 years ago are now $10,000. I mean, $5,000 is not much anymore. So your CIP would be drastically overburdened with even fire department replacing tires on a piece of apparatus could be $5,000. Generator that was replaced was $5,000. So I mean, so those things would be tied up in the CIP process, and they're really maintenance and repair items.
But these will all come through informational part to us anyway. So
Absolutely.
We know what's happening in that.
And again, this is capital improvement. This isn't anything that we're just giving a blanket okay to. It still goes through the process, and goes from the department heads to the planning commission to the board, and part of the budget process.
We started talking about this almost a year ago, and I'm glad it's finally coming to light, and I think it is long overdue. 5,000 is just too small of an amount.
It's cost too much now. Okay, we have a motion and support. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Consider resolution regarding opposing House Bill 6049 and Senate Bill 1025, addressing assessing process. You do have a resolution in your packet, and I don't know how much, I'm exposed to this a little bit more because I'm in the office and our assessor is keeping me updated on what's going on, but basically this proposal from the legislature, or at least one person, is recommending that huge changes in the process of assessing take place. Why they didn't focus a little bit more on the whole tax tribunal issue, I have no idea why they didn't, but for some reason they want to totally circumvent what's happening now, how it's structured, who can do it, what the levels are, what the training requirements are. And in a lot of the big cities, I can see the importance of this, or the ability to do this more because you've got more people. They want to totally change the board of review structure, who can seat, how much education they have, and if you think of that from a big city perspective, that's not quite as much of an issue. When you get up to the UP or even the northern lower peninsula, we're short people on a lot of our committees, even though board of review is handled differently. It's much more difficult for us to fall into the cookie cutter of the big city structure. Our Tilden Township's only got a few people. Even the mid-sized townships up here end up having to pay an assessor. Plus, the state wants to have fewer 2- and 3-level assessors. They want them to all be 4s. And whatever community can afford this, then they're suggesting the county take on the whole thing. And it just keeps, and I kept telling Delsey, I said, I know I'm not the best in understanding the whole excuse me, mode of assessing. But this doesn't make sense to me. The rationale doesn't. So I said, it must just be my ignorance of the process. And she goes, no, it's not. Everybody from A to B, downstate, upstate, assessors, you know, supervisors, everybody's saying, what are they expecting to accomplish by this? It's a total upheaval of the system. And again, instead of addressing the tribunal side of it that could eventually corrupt the tax system if it's left to go, this is so, and I think what bothers me about this the most is that when we have our residents come into the Board of Review and they have an issue that they want to talk about, you know, their fence line or their assessment or, you know, some of the things they come to us for don't apply on the assessing part of the tax roll. But when they come in and want to talk about it, we as residents know and understand what they're talking about besides the assessing part of it. We're right here, we live here, we know about their cricks and their rocks and the divisions and the subdivisions. So you take that to a bigger level in a bigger county where, you know, John Smith on his 40-acre farm or whatever goes into these people that have no clue what they're talking about. I think it's taking away from the resident that grassroots ability to take care of your stuff, your home, and your, like John was putting the importance of your home, your property. If you have issues and questions about taxation, it's hard to go off to some strange person. And then you're not even going to probably have the same person you would have had because now they've changed the whole administrative structure of it. But anyway, that's just a rough idea of what they're proposing. They're up to draft 5. This particular item is going to be discussed tomorrow in Lansing. We've had Dulcie prepared a resolution to submit. I'm thinking we can email it or fax it tonight so that they have it by 10 for the meeting 10:30 tomorrow. And actually, there are assessors and supervisors in townships and cities and villages. Well, not for tomorrow, but they're asking to have another group in. She's already been contacted by, is it it's like the assistant treasurer or something in Lansing of the state. So I mean, this is a big thing, you know. Anyway, we're opposing it. So go ahead, Randy.
Several things from an administrative standpoint that I'm concerned about. Number one, this did not come from the legislature; it came out of Treasury. It was the state treasurer that brought this forward. And in a very brief nutshell, the things that Supervisor Durant were explaining, in a very brief nutshell, what it does is it removes the assessing responsibility from the local governments and transfers it to county government. If you'll recall, when the current governor took office and was campaigning, his mantra was, there's too many levels of state government. This is an action to take one more element away from township operation and shift it to the county or to shift it to the state. And from an administrative standpoint, looking at it away from the political environment that you folks look at it, to me it's again another attempt to minimize townships as a legitimate form of government. They've been doing it with property taxes, they've been doing it with all the other taxes, they've been removing classes of property from taxation that have minimized our revenue stream. They've allowed the dark stores process to go forward. The governor could have stopped it. The legislature could have stopped it. This particular bill that came out of Treasury is literally less than 3 weeks old and it's coming up for a vote tomorrow. 3 weeks, 6 years on dark stores. 3 weeks this is going to get passed. And we're told it's not a matter of whether it's going to get passed, it's going into effect. We get to have comment. So there's more at stake here than just a change to the assessing law. It's dramatically changing the role of township in it. We've been taken out of setting speed limits. Now we're taking out of assessing. It's following that same course that this administration has been following since they've been in office. So that's my concern with it. I definitely recommend the board adopt the resolution that's being proposed with one minor change. You know, Marquette County in total land area is 3,424 square miles, in total area, including the water. There's been a comment made that land area is only 1,874. Well, that's true, land area. But I think the picture you want to portray is, if this gets shifted to the county and all of the assessing is done through the county seat here in the city of Marquette at the county courthouse, folks from Gold Mine Road and way up north have to travel to Marquette rather than in our township to deal with their assessing issues. So that's the impact. There's a real degradation of service to the residents with regard to this proposal, unless you're in some of the larger townships adjacent to Lansing and Wayne County.
See, Randy was looking at it from the administrative side. I'm looking at it from the resident side. Like he said, if you've got to go from Timbuktu to come down to the county, they don't know anything about what's going on.
Marquette County is the largest county in the state, and they're lumping us in with counties that are 3 or 4 miles square. We're 56 square miles. So, I mean, those residents that live outside of the core, the 8% of the township that's developed, puts them at a dramatic hardship in pleading their case and having it understood.
Yeah, the understanding part. So I did contact Sarah Cambenzi's office immediately as soon as I heard about this, and she's been working on it. And there's such a thing as called submitting a white card, and I told her to go ahead and do it. So I did that, and this resolution will help. And Delsey did forward this on to numerous other townships that were kind of figuring out what they were going to do or how they were going to approach it to use as a template. So she said, I hope that's okay. I said, yeah, go ahead.
The Tax Policy Committee will be hearing this at their meeting 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. So if the board approves this tonight and the clerk is able to fix the certifications to it, we would email it right to the House Secretary to be presented tomorrow morning.
Plus the white card. John?
Move for adoption of the proposed resolution with a small revision proposed by our manager.
Support.
Dave, did you have your hand up too? Okay. Motion and support. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Or Ernie?
When same time that rest of the supervisor found out about, I did too. I called Larry Merrill. He's the director from MTA, and I spent at least a half an hour on the phone with him, telling him what I thought about it and that. And he says, I'm getting a lot of comments already in that, so I'm assuming, I haven't seen anything in writing that they're fully opposed to it, but they should be at this point in time, because you got 1,200 townships in the state, and how many of them are going to be affected in that? And talking about the county can't handle what's coming into them. They don't have the staff, they don't have the physical area to do it, and you have enough problems going down there now to find a parking place. Trying to get down there to do something is a major chore. So.
And is there some way that, if it does pass, that all the township assessors could become employees of the county paid by the townships? I mean, some ridiculous, that's how ridiculous this whole thing is. Rather than try to have the county do it, just keep our own assessors and...
Well, and the way I understand it too, say for instance our assessor, because she's a level 4, can go out and do other communities. She's also required to put in so many hours a week there to answer questions or be available. I think it's 8 hours a week, so I don't know if that's 2 hours in 4 days or a whole day. I don't think it's gotten down that far yet. But there's also the idea that some of them could be clustered, some of the communities could be clustered. So Delsey could be able to do like 4 townships or something like that, or 2 would join up. And I mean, there's a lot of things proposed, because I think the people writing this, or that are trying to sort it out, are trying to figure out all the bad parts. It's like one of those bills that they submit and nobody reads the whole thing. And then they pass it and they go back and try to figure out how to implement it. You know, it just makes no sense. So things could change. There could be things down the pike that'll... Something
like that they're still township employees contracted through the county or some stupid thing just to make it work even
more smoothly.
Yeah, even though they're trying to shove it down our throat.
Well, there are a lot of level 2 people I shouldn't say a lot, there are a few in the UP assessors. So what happens to them? They have to either, go get another job.
They're out of work.
Try to do a 4-year, that's another couple years worth of study and expense and time. Most of the people that we would deal with, like I said, even from the lower peninsula up, the upper lower, this is like a part-time job for them, or they'll do assessing on the side, or the supervisor will do it, or, it's not as structured and as complete as it is downstate. And maybe they could draw a line, I don't know, and say, okay, everybody below this parallel does this. I have no idea. Or
They're going to have to do some revisions on it, that's for sure.
They don't see the
Can't see where it's
impact
gonna work.
that we would see. But yeah, taking away our,
Yeah, there've been 5 versions of this bill already, and it's been introduced to the legislature, and I guarantee you, they've already got the noses counted.
well, somebody's already accepted it, right, in
But
committee?
it's, in the House, it's been submitted, and, it's gonna be coming up for a vote after the Tax Policy Committee reviews it. But I guarantee you, they've already got the votes, the heads have already been counted. As fast as this has moved, in 3 weeks, they wouldn't even have proposed this. Nobody saw it until it was in the 4th version, 4th revision. It was the first time we saw it about 2.5 weeks ago. And it's been revised one more time after there was a huge public outcry, very minor revision. And now it's before the Tax Policy Committee, and it's been submitted to the House already by a legislator.
Do we have a motion on that?
Yes.
We've been talking too long,
Need to call.
and we'll have to do a roll call.
So my
Any other questions or comments?
my only question is what is the small revision? I got 24 square miles in there. You want to,
There's a revised copy. Basically, all it says is instead of 3,424 square miles, it would be 3,424 miles total area.
miles total area?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
on the one that I just gave you.
Okay, very good.
That's the revised copy.
Okay.
Okay, we just need to vote.
Trustee Marks.
Yes.
Trustee Everson.
Yes.
Trustee Wiegand.
Yes.
Treasurer Johnson.
Yes.
Clerk Rattari is yes, and Supervisor Durant.
Yes.
Motion carries. I will get that done tonight, so it can be emailed down for tomorrow.
Thank you. Okay. Pulled items from the consent agenda. We didn't have any. How about committee updates? Anything from you, Dave?
Yeah, just a couple. The Planning Commission from their May 23rd meeting, the master plan revision is on schedule. We're waiting for the results from the citizen survey that is going out before we can take a look at some more revisions in that. We're through Chapter 5. And we're still working on the Marquette detailing zoning compliance issue. And for the Recreation Committee, Chairman Springer pretty well covered all of that tonight. From the Road Committee, the only thing of any significance that went on is the road rehab maintenance project. The bid was opened on May 30th, and the Road Committee recommendations were considered tonight and will be submitted to the Planning Commission for their consideration at the June 13th meeting. We anticipate that the Planning Commission recommendations should be to the board by June 19th meeting.
So I'll just wait to see if you want it on the agenda. Just let me know, let us know.
Well, it'll be a recommendation coming from the Planning Commission, so
Okay. Anything else?
that would be it.
We had no committee appointments. Public comment? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Carl Hammerstrom, 33 Middle Island Point. I'm disappointed that some members of the trustees continue to fail to understand the charter and library laws under which the Peter White Public Library operates. There is at present no way in which the Peter White Public Library can appoint anyone other than someone recommended by the mayor of Marquette. Peter White very wisely made the library a state-chartered library. It is not the city of Marquette's library. The city of Marquette, by the charter, is required to be the fiscal agent for Peter White Public Library, and the mayor of Marquette is empowered to name members of the board, and there are 8. The charter requires the city of Marquette to levy 1.5 mills annually for the operation of the library. I speak with some authority because I've served for 10 years. In a previous life, I lived in Marquette. The library, I believe, has been very responsible in trying to make sure that the wishes of the contracted townships are heard. The library is empowered by law, as the township is empowered by the library law, to contract for services, and the law does not allow the Peter White Public Library to appoint different people. It's now been 5 years ago, but there was a 3-year process, and several of you participated in it, where the townships met with the Regional Library Cooperation, Suzanne Dees, and with the then librarian Pam Christensen, to explore the possibility of a regional library. Under a regional library, the townships participating and the cities participating would have the opportunity by an election to have members of their community be on a library board. The composition of the board would be by election, not by appointment. So that a township would not have any power to have a specific member on that regional library. Mr. Zappa has reviewed the laws, and we discussed that 2 years ago. 4 years prior to that, I think 15 years now, you and I have been discussing this issue. There is at present no way that any township could have representation, voting representation, on the Peter White Public Library. That's just the fact of life. The process of trying to create a regional library in which you could nominate individuals to stand for election is a very rigorous one. And as my recollection, a regional library can assess up to 3 mills. Is that correct, Roger?
2.
2.
2. So that clearly you wouldn't be saving any money by having a regional library. You'd be having a greater millage. I would hope that this idea of trying to have a direct trustee on the Peter White Public Library Board would just quietly die. It's not going to happen.
Thank you, Carl. Anybody else wish to address the board? Announcements first. We can comment in a minute. Any announcements anybody wants to share? I just want to thank somebody. I want to thank my husband, just because I can. It's our 42nd wedding anniversary today, and because of him, I'm capable of doing this and doing my other job. He's a very big help. He's a good educator. He's a good partner, and he'll never hear this, but I just feel like I want to say thanks, because this, especially the township part, takes a lot away from family. You hear that all the time when you're talking to some kind of a politician. They all say, well, I'm going to retire now. I need to spend more time with my family. That's about it, because they suffer. But I appreciate his support and his education. And one thing he told me a long time ago as we were paddling down the Autrain River Basin, which is 5 miles, and I thought it was going to be about 20 feet. And he, besides cussing me to keep going because we were in second place and I didn't know it, he said, you know, you can always do more than you think you can. And that stuck with me, even when I went back to school and got my degree. And I ended up actually saying that at a presentation at the college. But I just want to thank him, because he picks up when I can't do this stuff, you know. So that's the only announcement. Oh, but I want to tell you guys, we are going to have, Randy's going to talk about, excuse me, maybe some extra storage space in the future. I don't want to get into it now, but I just made the note, and we're going to talk about it another meeting. So that's it. Any other announcements? John?
Well, I guess as a member of the board, I'd like to thank your husband, too.
Thanks.
But as often as the issue comes up about the Peter White Public Library, people have to understand that the comments that are made about taxation without representation are absolutely valid. The point is, we can't change the Peter White Library makeup. Only they can. And I know for a fact why they'll never do that. It's because if you ever change the makeup of the Peter White Public Library from the way that it was originally put together, the legislature would look at it and say, you can no longer have any taxation that is in perpetuity. They don't give that anymore. They haven't given that for 75 years. So why is it that the Peter White Library and its organization and the hierarchy that is in town is never going to make the attempt to revise it? It's because they know that they would lose the perpetuity that gives them continuing taxation without having to go back to their own people. And all you got to do is think about that, and you know why they'll never go back and do that. That's something they don't want to lose. And there's probably a damn good reason for it, too.
Anybody else have any announcements? Was that your pen up? No. Okay. Manager's report. Randy?
Briefly, you do have a printed report in front of you. Basically, office hours for the summer. We're here at the office from 8 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon. Many times much later than that. But at any event, that is in effect. The main thing I want to talk about is coming up on June 16th, which is Father's Day weekend. Saturday, June 16th, we have our car show. That'll be taking place at the Westwood Mall parking lot, right adjacent to Applebee's. And that will start with registration at 10 o'clock in the morning. Registration for folks wanting to bring their cars to the car show is simply a contribution to the local food bank. We're suggesting either 5 cans or 5 items, basically, to donate, and that will get you registration. It will get you involvement in the judging of the vehicles that may make your car be the best of show. That will have an award. It will have you in the raffle drawing for all of the prizes that have been donated and the items that have been donated by local merchants, and it will get you and your co-pilot a free lunch as part of it. So there's not a dollar cost. It's a lot of fun. Last year, the 2 hit items that occurred that will be repeated this year were the burnout competition and Rev It Up, where folks had the opportunity to show off their noise, as it were, the power that they have. But there are no restrictions. You don't have to be a township resident, obviously. It's open to everybody. Last year we had a little over 100 cars. We're hoping for 150 to 200 this year. We have more room. We'll be staging in the parking lot in front of, between Applebee's and Kohl's, or Applebee's and Yonkers. The former Yonkers site is where we'll be staging. So between 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock, come on down to register. The actual static display and the show goes from 11 to 2. 2 o'clock, then we do a cruise. Basically, we're going to limit that cruise to Trowbridge area this year. Prior years, we got broken up with stoplights and left turns and a variety of things. So this year, the routing is going to be out of the parking lot, the Westwood Mall parking lot, Commerce Drive to Wright Street to Ontario, back down Ontario to Werner, and then back to the Westwood Mall parking lot. All right turns, with the exception of the start, so we shouldn't get broken up. Should be a nice little parade. There's lots of places for people to park and watch, including our parking lot right here, Thomas Theaters, all along that route if you want to see the cars as they go by. That'll be starting at 2 o'clock, led by our own fire department with our antique fire truck. So a lot of fun. Come on down. That's really all that I had. Other than the swing set that was sponsored by the 3 Rotary Clubs, the grant has been delivered. It is going to be installed as part of the renovation here starting, what, next week or later this week?
Started today.
Started today at Lionsfield Recreation Area, and when that installation is going to take place, the 3 Rotary Clubs are going to participate in that installation. So thank them again.
Thank you. Any questions for the manager? Okay. Review of motions, please, Randy.
Quite a few this evening, but I'll try to speed through them. First motion was the consent agenda, approved, roll call vote. Second motion was the regular agenda, approved. The third motion was to direct the clerk to draft ballot language for the library for the current renewal. That was approved. The fourth motion was to approve the short-term text amendment first reading. Fifth motion was to approve the rerouting of the MDNR trail. Sixth motion was to approve the staff policy request change regarding personnel policies revisions. Seventh motion was to approve the amendment of the DDA boundaries. The eighth motion was to approve the adoption of the DDA ordinance amendment first reading. The ninth motion was to approve the CIP baseline amount to $10,000. And the 10th motion was to approve the resolution opposing House Bill 6049 and Senate Bill 1025.
We got a lot done tonight. That's great. Items for future agenda, then, as far as I know, would be the second reading of the text amendment and the second reading on the DDA boundaries and a recommendation from planning. and on anything else that comes up in the meantime. Any board member comment? Yes, Ernie.
A comment I have is I attended the Michigan Municipal Treasury Association meeting last Friday, and there was 4 or 5 different sessions. The one session that was very interesting was that intruder training and personal safety was put on by the Michigan State Police and by the local emergency management coordinator here in Marquette County. And they went through what they have been doing and what has been done and what they're going to do. They put about 2 hours in there, and there was a lot of it was through overview and that on how to protect your area, what has to be done, how you should train your people for doing it and that. They indicated that the county on all their offices all have glass or plexiglass now at that point in time to protect them. So in listening to all these people, and I'm just wondering if we should maybe contact the emergency management coordinator at the county and see if they can put on a session for us. And it'll take about an hour and a half maybe on a work session type deal and that. And I talked to the trooper that was there, and Stacy. She said she'd be more than happy to come at the same time and review some of the things in that. And I explained a little about the openness of our office and that, and they just kind of shook their heads and that because of what's happening in the world at this point in time, and may come in and take a look and give us some suggestions of what we should or should not do in that as we move forward in that. So that may be something we want to talk about in the near future in that too. So.
Yeah, actually, Randy and I have talked about it for a while. I mentioned to Andra, I said, how would you feel about having a glass, you know, up in front of you when you're working and having people come in? And she said, yeah, that would be fine.
Yeah, I did download the design plans from Homeland Security, their suggestions for retrofitting public facilities and public buildings. Wow.
Oh, yeah. Well,
there's a lot to it, but they're coming up how your staff should handle something and everything else that goes along with it. One of the attendees there, and I think it's from Foresight, had a panic button, and I didn't get a chance to talk to him exactly what they meant by a panic button and that too. So things like this here, to get some background for staff and get some background for the township board here as we move forward as what would be best for the township and that.
The county courthouse, because of the courts being housed in the courthouse, have installed panic alarms and that wire directly to the sheriffs, to the bailiffs, and things such as that. So they have armed security on site, and that's been for quite a while. And they have, you're absolutely right, they have basically walled in all of their public access to offices, and protected them behind strengthened walls and resistant glass. So that's been done throughout the courthouse.
We were even talking about having a buzzer out here getting into the office.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, our part of it, so people just don't walk in.
Well, I think it's something that we can move forward to and get someone to give us some suggestions as we move forward in that too. So.
It's a dilemma for operations like a small township like us, because one of the things that people like about it is the openness and the ability to interact directly with their legislators and with the staff of the township. And, and that's a valuable asset as well. I mean, you have to go through that assessment in terms of determining just how much risk are you willing to accept, and how walled off do you want to be from your constituents? And that's a difficult question. It's easier at some place like the courthouse because the courts are there and the state requires that they be protected and that they require certain safety aspects like armed bailiffs and things such as that. We're much closer to our population, but we also have an increasing number of folks that are not residents that are here in the township and that have some issues and some checkered pasts that we have to at least be aware of.
I just bring it up because we have discussed about it.
Absolutely.
It just kind of just fell in line.
It's a concern. It's definitely a concern.
Well, we can schedule a work session. I'll look into it maybe after the budget or
somewhere
in there when we're not overwhelmed with stuff.
Probably not after the budget.
Well, not right after.
I don't think you're going to want to talk about much after the budget.
Yeah. I just meant we're not going to do it like next week or next month. Any other board member comment? Dan?
Is it my understanding that we pretty much have to put the library millage issue on this ballot, correct?
Roger and I have gone through this.
But in
Personally, I
2
thought it
years,
was a
in
referendum.
2 years, in 2020, we do not?
You're on.
You must put it on the ballot unless you terminate or revoke the contract.
6
Okay.
months prior to
And that's
termination.
what I was speaking of.
And that can be done 6 months prior to,
Could have done it today.
Could have, it needs to be done to give the 6 months notice, has to be done 6 months before the end of the year, so it would have to be done prior to June 30.
correct.
The contract and the ballot are two different things. You can have an automatically renewing contract, which is what you had before, and I'm not saying
No, I'm not
you should.
interested in that.
I'm not suggesting anybody should, but you still then have to have a reassessment of, are we going to put it on the ballot?
So in 20,
It's optional,
what?
which is optional. You don't have to put it on the ballot.
Well,
But you do
No,
under
wait
your
a minute.
contract.
What he's asking is when this contract ends, and it does end, then we have to
And both things are at
start
issue.
all over.
Do it all over again.
well, I'm not going to be in favor of putting anything on the ballot. I didn't like Mr. Hammerstrom's comments at all, directing to the board the way that he did. John had some very good valid points, and if he didn't like them, well, he's got his option to voice his opinion also, but I'm not, for $224,000 that we have to pay, it's not our money, but it is our residents' money. That much money, we can easily give every resident in this township a library pass. We can pay for it and save a hell of a lot of money. So that's my opinion on it. And one other thing on a good note that I wanted to say was I had the Public Works Department at my home. Last week I had a problem with the grinder pump, and I have nothing but good things to say about how they handled it, how they explained everything to me. They were there right away to fix it, and I just want to give them a attaboy for doing a great job.
Excellent. Anybody else want to comment, Randy?
Well, Trustee Marks is correct, but you got to realize for the library, we are not the owners of the facility. We are not the owners.
No.
So all we are doing is purchasing a service. So we'll never get representation there because it's different than the wastewater situation where we're part owners.
I understand.
Part of
that
the
too.
water system, like the water treatment plant, we're not owners. So we don't get representation there. All we do is purchase water from the city. And it's the same thing with the library. We are not the owners of the facility, or we would get hit with the bond and everything that they have cities gotten. So, I mean, we can hammer on this all we want, but we'll never have representation because we're not owners of the facility.
And that's fine, but they still shouldn't expect that we are going to automatically be putting it on the ballot either. And I feel that they feel that they expect that we're going to do this. So
They're offended if we don't.
I understand the public voiced their opinion, and 70% of them were in favor of it. But I'm not sure they know all the facts about it either.
Well, they
But
don't.
again, you have to remember that it's 70% of those that voted,
Yeah.
which was
Correct.
60% of the township.
Correct.
So it's
But-
70% of 60%.
But you got to realize, I myself don't like someone making a decision for me that is out of my hands. I'd rather have the opportunity myself to vote on it. I don't think it's correct for this board to not put it on the ballot and take that right away from the voters.
But
That's my opinion.
Right, but you can go buy a card. And why should
Well, that's true.
Walmart buy a card for you?
That's true, but we have a lot of people that maybe can't afford to buy a card.
We'll buy one for them.
Well, with the people who are so overzealous about the library and the contributions that they make, they can identify the people who
Well,
can't afford
I think we're missing the point here. It's not about that. It's about the opportunity to vote on it.
Right.
It's only the residents that, the business, you are correct, Lynn. The businesses don't have a say in this, but it's the opportunity for the residents to vote on it. And I don't want to take that away from them. It's not about the money.
Yeah, I don't
That's
know.
all I'm trying to say is,
I can understand.
you know, and like I said, John is, Trustee Marks is absolutely right. We will never get representation there. But you gotta realize we are not the owner of the facility.
It's still
And-
taxation without representation.
Something else that the public, our public, needs to understand. You can buy a membership at the library for about $75. If you look at your tax bill and your 1 mil is costing you more than $75, then you get into the arguments that Dave has brought up on occasion about not wanting to pay more than is necessary for the service.
Well, then you vote no.
And that's the note I made too on here when the doctor was talking. I know that we can't serve on the board, and that's what I said. In my lifetime, it'll probably never happen. And it's because of the city and the library charters. But there was I was never asked to participate in any discussion about a regional library. I don't know if anybody else was. He said that,
A while ago.
that we were invited.
That was a long time ago.
Well, I know the discussion came up when I was on the board and Pam was here, but as far as I know, the township's never been asked to participate in that discussion.
Not that I know of.
I just wanted to clarify that.
I'm just saying that residents that have talked to me were very offended by the fact that we would make a decision for them.
But do they know all the facts?
Yes, they do.
They know that it would cost them $75 for a membership and they might be paying $150?
They're paying it now, and they don't have a problem with that.
Well, and the other discussion was, and we were threatened by it with the previous director, that if we did that, they would raise the price of the membership for non-city residents to $150 or $200. So then we'd be the bad guys.
Well, but remember, if the township said, no, we're not gonna put it on the ballot, the library can put it on the ballot themselves as a
Right.
referendum.
And
So
that's-
the
and
right
that's-
to vote isn't really the issue.
Our involvement.
That's what I asked Roger when I talked to him the other day. I said, I just assume the library take care of this. We spend too much time dealing with something that is not our charge. This is not about the health, safety, and welfare of our residents. It has nothing to do with that. That's a perk. If they want to do that, let them do it.
I would like to see that.
That's fine with me. I don't
The
care.
voters are still voting then.
Exactly. They can do it themselves.
It's like the marijuana bill that's coming up.
Yeah, let them figure it out themselves. If somebody wants to have an issue, I'm all about it. That's the purpose of the survey, is to try to find out what people are interested in so that we can support that.
But on the other hand, the ultimate thing, they're still gonna end up at the board because we have to put it on the ballot.
That's fine.
No matter if they,
If that's fine. If that's what the public wants, fine. We're guessing. And they keep throwing around that 70%, and like Randy says, it's 70% of those who come out.
we're guessing, but they have every opportunity to vote no.
Absolutely.
And they haven't done it, so I think it's a moot point because they're not
Well,
They're
they
not voting
speak,
no.
and they are the ones that vote for us, and we got to, I guess, go by what their opinion is. But I just don't know if they know all the facts.
But it isn't something we're funding, is what I'm saying.
Right.
We're putting too much
Out of our
time.
coffers.
Right.
We're
Yeah.
putting too much
Pass
time
through.
into something that we have no
Nothing.
control over.
No.
That's my objection.
Let them do it.
We actually make a little money on it, so.
Keep trying.
Well, interest.
Talking about the cards for the library, not too many more years ago, it was 5 and 10 some. And when we got talking about maybe not putting on the ballot and paying for ourselves, go back and look at what happened. All of a sudden, the price went way up real quickly.
That's what I just said.
That. So it quadrupled and way, big time, real quick in that, so. Because,
But it has to go up across the board in all the area that they serve. So know that there's some reluctance to do that.
it went to all non-residents, went up from $5 to $10 to 75. They were even talking about $100, $150 in that.
My last point of the night is for a referendum question on that. I am not sure, because at the last conference I was at, there's only certain questions that can go to a referendum. And I don't think the library is one of them.
That's accurate.
So there's no referendum. Either you put it on or you don't,
So they'd still just come to us and ask for us.
just like they did tonight.
Okay. Anything else? One more
I
motion.
move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? 9 o'clock on the dot. Thank you, folks.